Hello, this is Andrew Dunn with the concurrent MPA and MS in Environmental and Sustainability Studies program at the College of Charleston, reporting in for biodiversity management with Dr. Andrew Shedlock. And this presentation submittal is about a request for proposal for $250,000 in funding for grant research that was brought to our attention, and I wanted to submit information related to our home and our coast here along the coast of South Carolina, and hope to provide some key insights and overview as to some of the research and work that I've been doing and would like to continue to build upon for the basis of knowledge here in South Carolina. And this grant would very much fund and is the amount that is needed to get through the next 1.5 to 2 years of work and scaling some of what is the goal here, which I will review. And thank you for the opportunity, and I would like welcome any questions. So this is a literature review, response, and restoration initiative about biodiversity resilience in the maritime hammock islands and salt marsh ecosystems of coastal South Carolina. So really, if you look at the coast of South Carolina on the map, this is the coast that we're talking about. Inland to where you have maritime forest and even inland rice fields, which are of importance for biodiversity in our state. So again, this is the topic, and there's photos throughout the presentation that were taken in the field in our biodiversity management course that lends itself into this presentation, and also from just traveling and this photo on the cover slide is from the South Carolina DNR Hammock Island study, which is important to reference for our hammock islands on the coast here. So the main objectives of this project are to create the body of information and additional work and a framework for the present and the future that would be able to be used by other stakeholders and as a coalition. So the funding would be used to conduct extensive literature review of biodiversity resilience and literature review of the data available on the land coverage of from marsh and hammock islands and how that has changed. Looking at that as an extensive literature review, and then putting it together into a response plan so that there's a narrative to use and from the literature review, and from that looking at needs to have a restoration plan of action for proactively looking at using nature-based solutions at scale along the South Carolina coast. We've just gotten started on this, but we need to get moving a lot more, and this $250,000 would help with creating a more extensive framework of information specific to our state, building off of some of the work and some of the interviews that I've been doing with others and some of the gap areas that have been uncovered from my body of knowledge. So this could be accomplished through, again, literature review and more gap assessments. A lot of this has already been in motion. So just working all of that together into a common framework and coalition kind of network for the state, coordinating things and putting together a structured response narrative, and then a potential plan of action for restoration, including recurring coastal South Carolina maintenance needs. Through stakeholder engagement, we could possibly help fund some pilot projects, getting some collaborative motion, or at least help improve the value of these projects as kind of part of the end result of this, as part of the plan of action for restoration, because pilot projects are what's needed first and foremost along the coast to then scale up more, which we have a lot happening a lot throughout the coast now. So we would get information about volunteers, networks available to look for the pro forma about doing scale, nature-based solutions at scale, to see what type of skilled labor and technical support will be needed compared to volunteer help that will be available along the coast as we see in our region here in Charleston. This would be done with a small internal team I would lead, as well as incorporating others from College of Charleston and interfacing with external regional organizations. So incorporating what people have already done helps create information that can be used to have the literature view and builds the gap assessment as well of what's needed. So I have a list here including the Hammock Island assessment for South Carolina, rice plantation and marsh habitat assessments, including marsh migration assessments. A lot of this work done by the Nature Conservancy and other key organizations, I've incorporated into previous literature reviews, so it would pull all of that together, as well as the recent nature-based solutions workshops and pilot projects in our area along the coast in South Carolina, and information about conservation development projects. And that forms the basis for a literature review and continued gap assessment to be formally created for the South Carolina coast, which would be the body of my work. The first part of it, they're complemented by the interviews with senior officials, some of which has already been started, but would continue to build off of this. So this is all extremely valuable, the proposed valuable specifically for resilience, watershed management for the whole state, but down to our coast and our watershed and our fisheries and other key areas, including public health and economic health. So extremely valuable, and without going into too much more detail, we can look at the coastal areas of the Hammock Islands here, as indicated from the Hammock Island study, and key areas for biodiversity and migratory habitat, but not always getting as much attention because of being disconnected and not habitated by people. Also, the tidal marsh areas along our coast, which we have substantial area of, and this is good for biodiversity and also includes rice plantations and extends inland, and can migrate into inland areas, including areas such as inland rice fields, which are already a host to great biodiversity as well. So tying all of this together, we can look at the tidal marsh next to the Hammock Islands, moving inland to maritime forest and inland rice fields as a set of data to look at the area and biodiversity. So the methods would be taking that data and compiling previous studies and satellite imagery and looking historically and mapping projected modeling into the future of what's going to happen with these key areas along our coast, and overlaying data about biodiversity and key trends about migratory routes and how that is so key and critical to our sustainable development of our coast. So biodiversity will be an indicator of the resilience and sustainability of our coast and our future. The data would be used to compile and add in the biodiversity information as part of this study, and then additional social research will be done through continued engagement with stakeholders and interviews, as mentioned previously, and continuing to work on supporting pilot projects and promoting more sustainable development, conservation and restoration of our coastal ecosystems for a stronger green infrastructure along our coast. So that would be the end result. The deliverable would be the literature review and they would have the response and restoration component, which would be in the narrative and the framework that brings in other stakeholders from the state and would be the key deliverable of this 1.5 to 2 year project. So to establish this and do proof of concept, I would compile all of the data, look at previous studies and trends, and show whether or not there's a gap that needs to be filled by this work. Inevitably, this work needs to be done and slowly is getting to scale along our coast. My proposal is to seed fund accelerating the coordination of these efforts and support some of the pilots and work to support green infrastructure and our resilience and public health. Thank you very much.